conductive wire, and you were so electric. I had no say when you came so near and just passed right through me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Geekdom is back. I'm your host, Deanna Chapman, and today I am joined by Murjani Rawls, and we are talking all about Frank Miller and Klaus Janson's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. This is a classic, iconic Batman comic, and since we're focusing mostly on Batman this month, but you know, there was also a Dick Grayson episode in there, so we're just considering this sort of a fun little Gotham month. But Murjani, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. It's been a while, but it's good to be back. It's been a Batman month. I've seen the Batman twice already.
Nice.
So this was right up my alley, other than also being like one of my favorite Batman stories, other than like Year One and The Long Halloween. You know, yeah, because I waited for the Batman, the movie, for so long.
Yeah.
And like it mostly paid off for me. Like I really enjoyed it. I was wondering if, like, I listened to the episode, I was wondering if like you felt that almost 3-hour runtime.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where I think the first 2.5 hours goes by very nicely. And then it's like that last 20 to 30 minutes, you're just like starting to feel it a little more. And obviously with a character like Batman, so much has already been said. Like, I have covered Batman Begins, for instance, but I have not covered the Dark Knight movie. And a lot of people I've talked to are like, well, everything's kind of been said about that movie, so it's not like I need to do an episode. I would still like to at some point, maybe, you know, do it during an anniversary year or something like that. But you could say the same for Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, because it's been out for so long. And just the fact that Frank Miller's work in general, not just Batman, but even a lot of his Daredevil stuff, is just so sought after with especially new comic book readers. You know, those are some of the first recommendations you get, especially with Batman. You know, read Year One, read The Dark Knight Returns, and there are a couple comics that come after The Dark Knight Returns as far as sequels go, but I actually haven't read all of those comics. I don't think I read, what is it, Master Race?
Yeah. There's like The Dark Knight Strikes Again, and then like the third one's like the Master Race one.
Yeah, so I haven't read that third one. I'm pretty sure I read Strikes Again at some point, but my memory of that one is a little hazy. But The Dark Knight Returns is a graphic novel here that really just starts with Batman in his retirement phase and coming back out of retirement. And one of the most interesting things that I remembered from this comic was the fact that you have Carrie Kelly as Robin, and Carrie appears in this, Strikes Again, and Master Race. So Carrie Kelly is very much a character who strongly exists in this version of Batman. You won't see Carrie Kelly at the helm of a Robin book or something like that. And it's one of those things where there have been so many Robins over the years too, between Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Damian, and Carrie Kelly. You know, there are just so many iterations of Robin because of how many people have played Robin, but also how many times DC has rebooted everything. So what was it for you about The Dark Knight Returns that really stuck with you when you first read it?
One of the things is, and it's funny because like we were briefly talking about the Batman, and one of the things I liked about that movie is that the depiction of Gotham, like if you think about, you know, like Tim Burton's Gotham, it's very gothic, and Nolan's version of Gotham is very like clean and like a real like New York City, but like underneath there's this like crime. There's just crime, and like, you know, like the mob is operating under. With The Dark Knight Returns, like Gotham is terrible. Like it's a shithole, and like it's, you know, crime and with the mutants and all that like terrorizing people. And it's weird because, like you said, like Bruce is retired. He's older, but especially in the first part of the comic or graphic novel, he has these like dialogues with himself. Like Batman is another personality. Like he's saying, like, you can't keep me down for long, and the fact that he's trying to forget and trying to put that beside him, especially with like his confrontation to the mutants before they try to rob him and then back off. It's like, very early on you find out that like Bruce Wayne is the mask, like Batman is the person. So like he cannot be Batman. Like he hasn't been Batman for a while because of Jason Todd dying, but he could not be Batman for 20 years. And eventually he'll go back to that no matter how old he is, because that's who he is. Like, it's not like this like millionaire, and in the book he's like depicted with like this white mustache, and he's still kind of like big and like muscular, but he's a little older. It's the navigation of that character that, like, especially with like the artwork with bats and how it's kind of like, he has like this, like, I don't want to say like a mental illness, but like, it's like, it's still that, like,
it's an obsession.
It's an obsession. It's a thing that keeps on gnawing inside of him, and it will never, as long as he's alive, it'll never will. So I really like that. Yeah.
And I know I've mentioned this before, but I've been taking Scott Snyder's Substack class on, writing comics and collaborating, and he does basically different topics each class, and he pulled up the first page of The Dark Knight Returns in one of the classes just to sort of show everyone how this first page, where you have, all of these panels and the big crash and explosion, and it says this would be a good death, but not good enough. And just how that first page alone tells you everything that's going to happen in this comic before it shows it to you. Because by the end of this, and I guess I'll spoiler warning this, but I feel like this comic has been out long enough that hopefully we don't need to do that. But there you go anyway.
Yeah.
By the end of this, Batman fakes his death. He dies, but it wasn't good enough.
It's just like this whole thing, and it happens with other characters too, like with Harvey Dent and Joker, that like you can't help to be who you are. Like Harvey Dent goes like under like therapy and plastic surgery, but he still goes and commits crime. And then when Joker seems like he's fine, as soon as he hears Batman, he gets awakened from being in a catatonic state and like goes on a murdering rampage. Like, I think Frank Miller did a really good job in showing, like, in this backdrop of Gotham, that through these facades and through like trying to rehabilitate people, or trying to things like, it's all going to come out in the wash as soon as they're exposed to each other.
Yeah, there's also a lot going on in this comic as far as commentary of the times. You see a lot of Ronald Reagan in this. You get a lot of quote unquote news clips, because you're just sort of seeing these talking heads in a bunch of the little panels. And another thing this comic does is it takes Jim Gordon out of the commissioner role, and it puts Ellen Yindel in place as the successor. And she is so adamant about arresting Batman, and she starts to sort of have these doubts after Joker goes on a crime spree. And Joker is obviously a part of this story, but he's not taking over like he tends to do in a lot of other comics, which I enjoyed. I think we've seen so much of Batman versus Joker over the years that to have Joker pop up and not become the center of attention, I think takes a special kind of touch in comics just because he is such a big personality. And you also have Superman showing up in this, and you have a very, very different version of Selena Kyle than I think we're used to seeing in a lot of comics too. You know, all of these characters are older, and the only one who doesn't feel older is Superman, for obvious reasons, because he's not human. And then you have the mutant leader and all of these, you know, sort of gang members, and they all look like Cyclops for a lot of this, which I think is funny. But there are so many characters who pop up in these 4 issues. Granted, the 4 issues are not 20-page issues. They're definitely much longer because this is, you know, a full graphic novel, which typically you'll have anywhere from like 5 to 7 issues in a story arc. So these are slightly longer issues, and you can sort of feel that at times just because you have, you know, a little longer in between these sort of cliffhangers, if you will, that a lot of writers will try to have at the end of issues. But I think it works well for this kind of story because Batman has slowed down in his old age, and the story, the way it's written, really reflects that.
Just to go off to that point, it's funny because he's as fit as a 55-year-old would be in the story, but he's been out of the game. So, like, when he first fights that mutant leader, he gets his ass kicked. But, you know, going back to it, he starts to use, like, that detective brain of his. And then, like, and I think this is one of the things that the animated version of The Dark Knight Returns depicts really well. Is like, you know, he's like, all right, we're going to fight in this big mud hole, and then I'm going to disable you and then beat you. Like, it shows how much of a tactician Batman is. Going back to your Joker point, I also agree that I like that he's not the center of the story. Obviously, when they introduce him, there's also that, like, sore spot of Jason Todd getting killed. And the way that they do Joker kind of as the end of, I guess, the second act of this whole, you know, 4-part story, it's great because they have, like, that final fight, and even though, you know, Batman has him near death, he still doesn't violate his code. Like, you can't kill him. But it's a sick joke because Joker ends up killing himself. So it's funny because you can tell, like, Batman wanted to do it, but now, especially with, like, all the people that he's murdered and, like, how much he hates Joker, but he was also robbed of it too. Because, like, Joker wants him to kill him, but, you know, Batman can't. So, yeah, I love that little, like, dichotomy to the end of what they had. I felt like a lot of the story is, like, confronting what Batman means and his, you know, vigilantism. Like you said, like, Ellen Yandel, like, is a staunch critic of Batman, other than, you know, Commissioner Gordon, who obviously knows Bruce Wayne is Batman, and they've been in, you know, partnership for years. But then there's also, like, the Reagan aspect on being, like, tough on crime and tough on vigilantism. And it's funny that Superman is, like, his right-hand man, or, like, the agent of the government. And where, like, you know, him and Batman are in opposition, where it seems like Batman does what he wants to do and gets things done, but also, like, Superman, like, is like, no, I can't let you do this.
And Superman has had a big change in this. His identity as Clark Kent is known. He's an agent of the U.S. government, and we see how things fall apart between him and Batman, who never have the best relationship. They do at times in the comics, but there's always that, not necessarily suspicion from Bruce, but he's always cautious. He always has that kryptonite with him, or somewhere nearby just in case, because he knows how powerful Superman is and what can happen if someone is able to turn him, which we've seen in numerous comics as well over the years, how Superman has been manipulated and sort of, turns to the dark side for a bit. And Batman is someone who has always been able to keep everyone in check, really. And you see the banter between him and Oliver Queen as well, because I would say most of the other heroes, especially the ones who have been in, like the Justice League with Batman, don't love listening to Batman, even though he's almost always right.
Oh, no. But in Oliver Queen's kind of like defense, like Superman did take his arm, So I understand that. Yeah, like Batman and Superman have always had like this, I guess frenemy relationship.
Yeah.
And it's if you want to call it that, like they're like allies, but at the same time, like, Batman, Bruce looks at, Clark as like this righteous Boy Scout, which, I mean, at times Superman can be, the greater good and justice, like he has things in mind, but at the same time, like Batman's like, listen, like just stay out of my way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, please just stay out of my way. And especially when they have that, that talk before, the final confrontation and things of that nature. It's going down to their final fight. It's like, it puts them on even footing because, you would think that Superman, as powerful as he is, would just beat the hell out of Batman. And like he does kind of compromise his, like, I guess I'll call it a Superman Buster suit. He compromises it, but like with, again, going to like Bruce's ingenuity and kind of also being almost one step ahead of everybody, he gets Oliver to shoot that, that kryptonite arrow and things like that. And I think it goes back to like one of the famous lines in comics that like a lot of people point to when you say like Superman is like the greatest the greatest superhero ever. And before, hopefully I'm getting this right, but like this is the man, you have to look at the man who beat you. Yeah, I just found that being very powerful even before Bruce, spoiler alert, fakes his death.
Yeah, and honestly, I had read this before, but there was so much that happens in it that I forgot about a lot of it. Like, I remembered Carrie Kelly as Robin. I remembered it was Batman sort of coming out of retirement, and there was this whole thing with the cops, but some of the sort of B-plot just totally went out of my mind. And so revisiting this was really nice. And, Carrie has short hair, so she gets mistaken for the Boy Wonder quite a bit in this. And I don't know if that gets addressed later on, but she's 13. And we all know that Bruce takes in these younger kids for the most part. I think maybe Jason Todd might have been the oldest at the time of, becoming Robin. I'm not really 100% sure on that, so don't quote me on that. But Dick was obviously very young. And Damian, well, that's a little different since he is Bruce's actual son. So
yeah.
You have sort of these kids who all come in around roughly the same age. And it's not even that Carrie Kelly is like a kid who is getting into trouble or, is in some dire situation at home. She's a pretty normal kid. She is just someone who comes along and saves Batman's life dressed as Robin. She's dressing up as Robin on her own. And it was one of those things that I really liked how they changed that. It's not like she had to have dead parents. She didn't need to be an orphan or anything along those lines. And it was honestly refreshing
Yeah, Carrie, like you said, she's not, like Dick and Jason Todd, like she's not an orphan, but like but her parents they might as well not be there, like I think off frame, one of them says like, didn't we have a kid or something like that? And Bruce comes, like when her and her friend gets attacked by like the mutant gang members, he comes and saves her, but she gets, she becomes inspired, and then she, like, I think she, spends, like, gets her lunch money on a Robin outfit?
Yeah, something like that. And a quick note on the parents thing, they do definitely say that, but, she's not without a place to live, and all of these things that we've seen with previous Robins. And I think that was sort of the big difference that I noticed. It's like, okay, she is not an orphan. She has parents. Yes, they're not fantastic parents, but she's doing well in school. She's a Girl Scout, I think. And she is, at least somewhere where she has a roof over her head. And I don't know about back then, but I'm pretty sure you have to pay to be in Girl Scouts. So I imagine her parents at least paid for that.
Yeah. They probably like did that to be like, okay, let's have her do something. Let's get her out of her hair or something like that. Like even when she like goes on as Robin, like she uses like a slingshot and firecrackers, which is funny. You know what I mean? Like, and she's also like a gymnast, so like she has some know-how, but obviously she needs to be trained in fighting and things like that, because I don't know, if you could beat somebody like Two-Face with like firecrackers.
Yeah, that is very true. But overall, I think the way that this depicts Bruce as mostly Batman, and like you said earlier, Bruce is the mask, not Batman. And that comes across very clearly in this. It is not beating around the bush with anything it is trying to say in this comic. It is very straightforward, and I like that even though it's straightforward, Frank Miller isn't treating the audience like they need to be told everything. That's certainly not the case. It's just the way that Bruce acts and the way that he is drawn in this and the way he talks to other people. It's very clear what Bruce is going through in his quote-unquote retirement, and you have this sort of injection of youth once Carrie comes along, and it seems to be what he needed, because there's a comment that Jim makes in this about Batman and Dick Grayson, and it's very clear that Bruce has not talked to Dick in a long time. I think he says it's been years, in fact, and that is when it hits you just how far he sort of fell and how he pushes people away.
Oh yeah, he definitely like blames himself for Jason to the point where, like you said, like he hasn't talked to Dick in years in this story, and it's like the thing, like especially in the beginning of the book, like when he meets like the mutant gang, and then when he's sitting down and the Mask of Zorro comes on, it's almost like a person who like say like there's a full moon out and a person starts to turn into a werewolf. Like all these triggers are like happening to him where it's like, oh God, like I can't stop this. Like no matter how far I push this down inside myself, like, and how much, I try to make it seem like I don't care about what's happening in Gotham right now, I still have to do something. I still have to be that person. And I think that really comes along full circle in Frank Miller's story, especially like when he defeats like the mutant leader, and then the gang start calling them the Sons of Batman. But then he was like, oh, like they start all violent, and he's like, whoa, no. Like you have to be like a non-lethal or like a helper gang, basically. It was kind of great to see how like his character almost evolved, even though he's obviously, you know, a little crestfallen. He's jaded for losing, but like even taking on Carrie and his relationship with a very elder Alfred at this point, who basically, you know, his father, like, or even like Selena Kyle. It's sad because like it's also making up for lost time, but also it's like, damn, man, like, you know, if you would have allowed yourself to like feel and like allowed people to be there for you, like it could have been more.
Yeah, and they kill off Alfred in this. So they're not afraid to have us lose some characters that have held such an importance in Batman and Bruce's life over the years. You know, as soon as we see Wayne Manor go up, Alfred has a stroke and just dies, you know? So they hit you hard with some of this stuff. And the final 2 pages, when you have the heartbeat coming back and Clark just winks, and then you have that final page where they're basically being left alone. Bruce knows this, and you have Oliver there too, and they're just sort of getting ready for the next phase. And he has decided that this is what a good life looks like to him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's lost Alfred, so he's lost that pillar there, but now he can be that pillar to other people. Like he could be that pillar to Carrie, and then, you know, the Sons of Batman, and and maybe a little bit of Oliver too. It's cool, you know, it's this full circle moment where now Bruce has not like jumped into seclusion. Like now let me back up. He's in seclusion because like it's like kind of like a silent agreement that like Superman would leave him alone, but he's ready to take on crime again. But he also knows his limitations. Like he is 56, so like now I have to train up. You know, despite losing Robins, I have to train up younger and others to like take the fight with me, because I'm not the only one who, you know, can do this or has to do this. And that's also spoken about in like The Dark Knight Strikes Again, and also like the thing of like, you know, the U.S. government, like, you know, Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel kind of like brought in also. So, but, you know, he trains up like an army of like Bat Boys and things. And it's another like book where like, you know, Bruce actually opens himself up. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah. There's a reason this comic is such a classic. And like I said at the beginning, it's tough because a lot has already been said about this, but Murjani, do you have anything else before we move into a special little segment for this episode?
Speaking about that like special little segment, like I said, like this is one of my favorite Batman stories, especially because it speaks about like, you know, government and, you know, what's good for like a mass of people versus a city like Gotham, and really gets into the Bruce's origins where like the villains in it, and maybe you could look at Superman as kind of a pseudo villain. Like it's all a part of Bruce's personality and like what he's gone through over the years. I think that Frank Miller and everything from the like the artwork and everything like is just I think is phenomenal. The animated version is also good. Everybody can go, you know, check that out and seek that out. It's pretty good. I think Peter Weller does the voice for Batman. Yeah, you're like RoboCop. Like does the voice. He does a good job. So like, yeah, that's all I got.
Shout out real quick to Lynn Varley, who did colors on this, because it works really well with the tone of the story. And on to our segment now, where you want to talk a little bit about how this comic influenced Ben Affleck's version of Batman in the movies. And obviously, Affleck was one of the older actors to play the character. And you have this sort of more gruff, I guess you could say, version of the character, even more so than I think we see in the Nolan movies, just because of how much he has been through. We don't see Robin in Batman versus Superman, but we do see that graffitied Jason Todd Robin suit. And that is the closest we get to having Robin in any movie that features Affleck's Batman. So for you, what about Affleck did you think they did well, and what aspects did you enjoy that they pulled from this comic?
Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of the discussion kind of gets lost with Affleck's Batman because I guess he didn't really get a proper arc, I guess. I mean, it's fuller with Zack Snyder's Justice League out now. Like you see kind of like the, out of the darkness Bruce, in that movie. It hit, the best depiction is from obviously like Batman, Superman, Dawn of Justice. We get another flashback of Bruce, like Bruce's parents dying. I'm so glad they did not do that in the Batman. Like, I think we know his, Joe Chill shooting them outside of the theater. Like, we've seen that enough. What I think they did well is like Ben Affleck's Batman, who's obviously older. He's very, very, very jaded in this one. Like, he's very skeptical of everything in this. I guess I'm a little bit more fond on the movie, but it's a hosh-posh of a movie because it's dealing with a lot of subjects. But, like, he's more of a menacing horror character in this. Because when you first see him in the warehouse, like, it's almost shown like he's like a villain. Like, he's branding people, he's brutalizing people, and it comes into like this collision course with, Clark Kent or Superman, because like who the hell is this vigilante, and like why is he branding people and why is he doing this? But I like the dinner scene where they both talk to each other without knowing who each other are, and Bruce kind of like rebuffs him and is like, who is this, like, the Daily Planet does puff pieces on Superman all the time. Like, we don't know, kind of like the basis of like, he's an alien, like who is he to operate the way that he wants, and Batman can't do that. Obviously, like the physicality of Affleck's Batman, training and the exoskeleton suit fighting Superman is very comic, dynamic. Not the Martha scene though. I don't know. I still don't like that scene.
Yeah.
That kind of takes you out of the fight, but just basically kind of how that Bruce and Batman operates. Of he's more of a thinker. He has more of an edge to him, especially in that warehouse scene. He has to kill people. Like, I counted like 5 people that. I mean, he smashes a guy's head in like the floor. He throws like a wooden panel at another guy. I'm like, okay, like this Batman his no killing code is obviously not. I don't have a problem with that, but like his no killing code is void here. He's killed at least 5 people. I think that's the closest we'll get to like the Dark Knight Returns Batman. I thought it did a good job. I have no idea what they're doing with the Flash. I know that Affleck's Batman is coming back for that.
Yeah, and
maybe
Keaton's
dying. Yeah, and Keaton's Batman. So like, it's like, does Ben Affleck's Batman supposed to be the older Batman, but Keaton's Batman is the older Batman? So is he gonna be like the Dark Knight Returns kind of Batman, or the Batman Beyond Batman? Because he's also supposed to be in Batgirl. So And, so I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I can't say I'm excited for it, but my note on Affleck's Batman is I do wish he would have had a solo movie because of the fact that we see him in this sort of rampage that we haven't seen Batman in before because, like you said, he always had that no-kill code. And here, sure, we see the Jason Todd suit, but I feel like that's not enough justification in that movie for him to act the way that he does.
Yeah, it's very... I guess the problem I would have with that is that, like, it's very... Okay, like, this is what's coming. We can explain this in a future movie. And, of course, Ben Affleck wrote and was supposed to direct the Batman movie until, the you know how DC does its slates. Like, they'll announce a movie, then they'll cancel it. Then they'll announce 4 movies, and then they'll cancel them or only make 2. So I think that, like, you get that scene where he looks at the suit and is kind of looking at, like, a brooding way, and it's like, that's the Joker, but at the same time, it would kind of be nice to, to kind of see it, to, like, drive that point home. I get what you're saying, but that, like, it was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of had to be explained afterwards, So, like, comic book nerds like you and I know what that scene is about, but at the same time, like, somebody who, like, is coming into it, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's Jason Todd. That's the, the guy Joker killed.
Yeah, there's a lot that I think Affleck just never got the chance to do, which is unfortunate, but I did enjoy the Batman. So I am hoping that DC will sort of stick with Pattinson for a while and give us enough of sort of this backstory, especially because that one took place so early in Bruce being Batman. So I think there's a lot more room to work with there, but let's move on to some recommendations. I know you sort of mentioned a couple things along the way here, but I am going to suggest that people check out Scott Snyder's Batman run, in particular the 2 0-year trades, which is Secret City and Dark City. I think that's when Snyder's run really starts to do something different. Not that I don't love The Court of Owls, The City of Owls, and Death of the Family, which all 3 of those come before 0 year. But I think if you're looking for something that's a little different, that run is a great run to read all the way through, in my opinion. So either start with The Court of Owls or read 0 year, whichever way you want to do it.
One of my recs is going to be The Long Halloween, Jeff Loeb's Long Halloween. I think it's a perfect companion to, like, watching the Batman. If you want to, like, get an evolution of how the Rogues Gallery came and how like the Batman ends with, Oz looking out to the city as he becomes Penguin, and that scene where, like, oh, like, the Joker's in Arkham Asylum too with the Riddler. Like, it's a good reintroduction to kind of, see how Batman's, like, Rogues Gallery evolves, and, like, Two-Face and Scarecrow and Joker. Like, and one of my favorite Batman villains that I hope that they make into, like, a live-action adaptation of him, the Mad Hatter. Yeah, like, check this run out. It's, like, I think it's about 13 issues, but it's well worth, like, the read. Like, check it out.
Yeah, I completely agree. So on that note, Murjani, I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about the classic Batman comic, The Dark Knight Returns.
No problem. Thank you for having me.